Welcome, everybody, to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and we are so honored to be back here for the spring term with our most prolific guest, the Dean of Student Engagement, Adrienne Thoman. Thank you so much for joining us today, Adrienne.
I always love that intro, and thank you for having me.
Well, it's most certainly our pleasure to have you on the show, certainly as the most decorated guest that we have. As we do at the beginning of every term, we have Adrienne on to highlight some specific events throughout the term. Now, some of these events will take place during April, but some of them will be later on in the term. So we have several things that we want to talk about, and of course, coming up shortly will be Adrienne's Featured 3, everyone's favorite segment of Adrienne's 3 can't-miss events on the term. Another massive term in terms of some of the things that you have lined up, but I want to start off with a recent conference that you went to.
Oh, my goodness.
And I want to talk about this in regard because really the purpose of it's called APCA, and the purpose of the APCA conference is for you to be able to network and meet with some people that might come to campus at some point, making some decisions about not only maybe what some of them cost, but what effect and impact they would have on the campus community. Now, of course, the last 2 years due to COVID, unfortunately, did not happen. So this is your first time back in quite some time. So tell us a little bit about this and tell us maybe some little spoilers of some things we can expect.
So one thing I appreciate, this conference, it literally happens, like we were registered to go. It was the weekend right when COVID hit. So I remember being 2 days before the conference. Are we going to go? Are we not going to go? What's this thing called COVID? How's this going? And just that we didn't know anything yet. We weren't wearing masks yet, none of that. And they did still have the conference, but unfortunately we were not able to go. We chose not to.
Right.
I will say it felt amazing to be back there this year. It just felt so good to be around all of the people. It's such a great opportunity. You know, I was able to take one student, one of our officers of our activities advisory board, Brian Strawhecker.
And he did an amazing job fundraising as well. I had a wonderful lunch.
He worked
as part
hard.
of that.
He worked hard to get there. It was so cool to be able to see him. He could network with other students and programming board officers. They had sessions there where they had like ed sessions for them to participate in. He networked with agents who represent comedians and musicians and different vendors that we can bring to campus. And that was cool, like to give him the opportunity to do that. Always a great experience. And he found some really cool stuff that we actually have an officers meeting this week where we're going to kind of dive into which ones we think are going to be the best to bring to campus. But there was this DJ, right, who DJs on the beaches of, I'm not sure which beaches, but there's a YouTube clip of him on a beach DJing live. And he wears this foam head that's like a sun that glows. So he's got this light up foam sun. You can't see his face. He's just this glowy sun head. His like tag name is Always Sunny. Super, super cool.
That's really neat.
He came on, he did like a set for everybody. The entire room stood up and danced. It was so cool.
That's great. Well, I'm glad that you're able to not only go back, but to have this opportunity to see what's out there for some of the activities that we're bringing to campus. And of course, every time you're on, that's what we're talking about is the wonderful activities, because a major part, yet probably at the same time a very small part of your job, is to put the activity calendar together. So that's really what we're going to focus on for the rest of our chat here today about some of the really cool things we have going on campus. The first thing, and we talk about this a lot, the first thing I want to talk about is the Back to Class Blast. This is going to take place on Thursday, April 14th on the quad, weather permitting, of course, from 11 to 1. And it gives our new students and old students a chance to check in with some of our clubs, and it's a wonderful opportunity for our clubs. In fact, most of the students that we have actually gotten to join the Nightly News, for example, we've met at the club fair / Back to Class Blast. So tell us a little bit more about that coming up.
So our Armed Forces Association has already committed to be staffing the grill and making sure we have plenty of free food for everybody. We are going to have the talented Lucy Freeman. She's been on campus before performing. She's going to return to us and perform during the Back to Class Blast.
And I love the music that you do. It's so cool. And it's at a good volume that there can still be conversations, but that it's just a nice little ambiance.
Oh, it adds, Live music for me adds so much to anything.
But the Back to Class Blast will take place on April 14th in the Quad again for all the not only new students but returning students as well. Gives you a chance to find out some more about what the wonderful things that our clubs are doing. Gives you an opportunity to meet some of the club advisors, also some of the club officers, and it's really just a great kickoff to the term. And we're definitely looking forward to it being back outside.
Yeah.
All right. A second thing I wanted to talk about is the Knights baseball. We have a few games left. Our schedule is a little front-loaded, and of course, because of typical March and April weather, we've had to reschedule some games. But I can say that both April 15th and April 22nd are both happening. Both will be doubleheaders. Now, April 15th will take place at In the Net Sports Complex in Palmyra. That's where our home games had been in the past. And April 22nd is a huge day for the Knights. Is really our senior night and our community night that'll be taking place over at FMB Field. So, Adrienne, you've been at all of the games thus far, and you've been, a major part of the concessions over there. What are your impressions so far from the baseball season?
It's so incredible to see our guys on that field. It's just, it's hard not to just get all warm and fuzzy about it. You know what I mean? I'm so proud of them, and I'm just so excited for them to have that opportunity. And I think they're enjoying it too.
Absolutely. And it's funny because Professor Davis has joined me on a couple of the broadcasts to this point, and I find myself every single game saying in our commentary to the audience how literally it's very I'm trying to put my words together here. It's very tough in the moment to understand the situation that you're in because there's so many things going on. We have so much. I mean, we've got packets of information we need to get. We need to get the lineup cards. I'm keeping score of the game. I'm changing the graphics on the screen, making sure our camera's in a good spot. So I think when we actually are there doing the broadcasts, which you can find on twitch.tv/centralpenn, we'll be doing the last two home doubleheaders. I don't think in the moment it's as easy to kind of unpack the impact that this has. Our students aside, I'm talking about myself personally, this is a chance of a lifetime to be able to call games on basically, a field that I've been to and watched so many major league players on, and the fact that I have the ability, along with Professor Davis and of course many of the students that are part of the club who are involved with this, it's something that I'm at a loss for words. And for me to say that I'm at a loss for words is unique. That doesn't happen very often. I usually can find the words that I'm looking for. I talked about this a little bit on your show, which we'll talk about shortly, about my dream is to be a baseball commentator. I love baseball. I always have. And the fact that I can do it here is such a dream come true. But the fact that I'm able to do it at FNB Field, it's very, very difficult to put into words, and I think it'll take me after the season's over to really kind of reflect on what this season has meant, not only just to me, but to the players and to the college and to our whole entire athletic department. What this has done for us, I think it's going to be a major recruiting tool. Even just being out there with you on signing day was such an important day.
So cool.
And to have those young men who many traveled very far to be here, to have a chance on a beautiful but cold Saturday morning was it's something they'll never forget.
I loved the look with the families in their faces. Their student comes up and signs that paper, and you could just they were beaming. That to me was so powerful. It gives me chills thinking about it because you just see how much it meant to them.
And I also want to give a shout out to all of the people who put this on. And I don't want to list names because I know that I'll miss someone. But there are so many people involved, all the way from you to Casey to myself and Professor Davis, all the way down the list. Again, I'm not going on this long list because I don't want to miss anyone, but the number of people that it takes not only to make the games happen but to make the broadcasts happen, it's just a collaborative effort all the way. And I gotta say that so far it's just been an experience I will never ever ever forget. And I hope we're there for years to come, and I believe we will be. So just be sure to keep mark on your calendar, April 15th. That's going to be in the net in Palmyra. And April 22nd is our community night. Come one, come all, and join us at FNB Field. Please go to centralpennights.com for more information, the most updated schedules and times for those games. But if you can't make it out, check out our broadcast on twitch.tv/centralpenn, and you can cast it right from your phone onto your TV and watch us on the big screen. So we're looking forward to those games. The last thing that I wanted to bring up before we get to everybody's favorite segment, Adrienne's Featured 3, is our quarterly CPC film series.
I'm so pumped about this one, too.
That's going to take place on Friday, May 13th at 6 o'clock in the Capitol Blue Cross Theater. This term, we are going to welcome Nightly News President Janelle Dulac presenting the 2007 edition of Hairspray.
I'm going to try my best not to sing along, but it may happen.
I got to say, this is one I've never seen before.
What?
I am not. I must be totally honest with you. When it comes to the types of movies that I typically watch, musicals are not typically on that list. That being said, I thought I was doing something nice for my wife Jackie a few years back, and we went to see La La Land because she loves musicals. And you know what's funny? I'm the one that walked out of there loving it. She wasn't super big on it.
Oh my gosh!
I left that movie was like one of the. It was a very memorable experience, and so I thought it interesting. Something really unique here, though, Adrienne, and of course we can chat about the movie and Janelle's presentation before the show starts. So as you're aware, we have the Nightly News Media Club has won 3 Pennsylvania News Media Association honorable mentions from 2021.
Which is incredible. Congrats again on that.
Thanks.
That's so cool.
So myself and Leslie Heimbaugh did win for Best Podcast. Well, 3rd, again, honorable mention. Leslie also won for a story she wrote on Betsy Ham from Duck Donuts, who came to campus. And we also won for our Layers of Community series. So several of our writers won for that. We're going to be presenting those awards at the beginning of the show. And Jen is one of those people who won.
I did not know that. That's going to be great.
Leslie will be there, too. So we are going to present those awards at 6:30. And we're hoping that everybody's going to be there and receive those awards and to be recognized before Jen's presentation. So not only if nothing else, obviously we would love you to come for the whole shebang, but even if you can just be there to help support the wonderful things that our club members have done, it's going to be something that's really important and hopefully again memorable for our students. I also think this is going to be memorable for Jen because as somebody who has been our club president for over a year now, this is her last term, and of course we miss her. And Leslie also graduated, and so we've got several of our students getting ready to graduate. So this was something that we wanted to allow Jen and provide her the opportunity to do this because, again, after Leslie, she's only the 2nd student ever to present.
And I have to just give a shout out to both of those students for being the absolute superstars that they are. Just incredible all that they've done during their time with us. And the cool thing is they are just getting started.
Absolutely.
I see so many more amazing things in both of their futures.
So again, Friday, May 13th, that's a CPC film series. The 2007 edition of Hairspray presented by Janelle Dulac. And, of course, the Nightly News will be sponsoring that. So we'll have plenty of movie-themed treats and beverages. And, of course, we're going to be presenting those awards at 6:30. I do want to give a quick shout-out to you and sort of a spoiler. You are going to be doing the summer edition of the CPC film series. Tell us a little bit more about your film that you selected.
Well, I have a favorite movie that will always be my favorite movie. It is Dirty Dancing with Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze. So I will be presenting on that, and I cannot wait. I have loved that movie always and forever. I got to go to Dirty Dancing weekend at where Kellerman's was. It's not really Kellerman's, it's Mountain Lake Lodge, but we did a very special weekend there. I would like to say we took 2nd place in trivia, which is huge. Not first, but we're still solid.
Well, that's really cool. We don't have any more information about it, and we won't like have a date or anything until after the spring film series. But keep an eye out over the summer for that. All right, Adrienne, it is now time for everyone's favorite segment, Adrienne's Featured 3 events for the spring term. Start us off with event number 1.
Okay, event number 1, our Central Penn College Race Against Racism. It's help partially to support the Racial Equity and Social Justice Challenge of the YWCA of Harrisburg. I know personally for me and many others on campus agree with me, fighting for social justice, anti-racism, it's not something that I took the class, I'm done, check. Like, it's really something that you have to continue to embrace, and it involves tough conversations and learning new things and being open to being open to hearing maybe things that you maybe had wrong impressions of, and just continual growth, right?
And I think that's one of the big things about being on a college campus is this is a sort of a safe space for those difficult conversations to happen. And I'm glad that, especially here, a lot of those tough conversations do happen, because just because they can happen doesn't mean they do. And that's one thing that I love not only about you and Megan Peterson. You're always trying to advocate for different voices to be heard on campus and provide them that platform. And I think that that's something that the college does very well. I think I don't want to point out to one specific institution, but yes, there are plenty of rhetoric that yes, these conversations can happen on a college campus, but they don't always.
Yeah.
So that's the Race Against Racism. Now, you talked to me off air a little bit more. This isn't specifically like what they've done in the past. So tell us a little bit more about how this is going to be set up.
Sure. So the YWCA used to have an actual 5K event that they ran as the Race Against Racism. And then since COVID happened, they've adapted it, and now individual groups are able to do their own versions of the race. So we're going to do a Central Penn specific version. It's going to be here on our campus. I hope to mirror a few elements of the original race that was planned by the YW, and obviously include some facts, some information, being able to make it a learning experience for those that participate. We're going to have a walk route. You can walk, you can run, really whatever your jam is, you can do it and participate in that way. I'm going to make it accessible to everybody, and have a cookout when we're done.
Awesome. So again, that's going to be on April 22nd. Meet at the bridge at 3 o'clock for the Race Against Racism on April 21st. All right, what's event number 2 on Adrienne's Feature 3?
April includes Earth Day. So we are going to go green. We've got a sustainability committee that I'm so proud of to have here on campus. We are going to do a highway cleanup. We have actually adopted a highway. That's not new. We've had one ever since I've been at Central Penn College, and many years before, but it is a mess and needs to be cleaned up. So we are going to do a highway cleanup on Saturday, April the 23rd. It's going to be open to anybody. So students that are wanting to come and volunteer, want to bring their families along, they're totally welcome. And we're going to do that and probably end it with a little pizza afterwards.
Now, tell us where our stretch of the highway is.
So it's actually right by campus. So if you're coming off of that, like the Enola exits, we kind of have the on and off ramps around those Enola exits.
Do we have signage anywhere out there that says that we are?
We do. It's along the main drag there. There's
do me
this
a huge
highway
favor
adopted by.
when you're out there, snap a photo of that. I
will
would
do
love
that
to
for
make sure
you.
I have that. So if we, do any stories about this type of thing, we have that photo.
Absolutely.
So if you're interested in participating in the highway cleanup on April 23rd, please feel free to email Adrienne at adriennethoman@centralpenn.edu. All right, Adrienne, what is the final event on Adrienne's Feature 3 for spring term?
Oh, I am so proud to be able to say this one is back on the list. We haven't done it for the past 2 years, but we are having our Women's Leadership Retreat this year. It's going to be at Camp Hebron. It's 2 nights, 3 days. Every year we've done this in the past has been so unique and so special. I know I speak for both myself and Megan Peterson, who co-facilitates. This year we have one of our counseling interns, Jessica Springstead, that's going to help to join us in the planning. It's just always such an incredibly meaningful weekend that we're able to connect with our students, give them leadership development training, have a lot of fun. We have an epic talent show every year. It's just really special, and I'm so happy that we're able to offer it again. It's going to be April 30th to May 1st. There is a cost. However, our counseling center has offered to offer scholarships to any students who might see that as a barrier. We want everybody who's able to go to join us.
That's amazing. And I will tell you, obviously, I've never been to a women's leadership retreat, but what I would say is I've had the opportunity to talk to some students who have gone to this in the past, and they have left, literally in their words, a changed person. Now, again, I think, number one, leadership skills are important no matter who you are. But in this particular case, I love that you focus on leadership, but it's not the sole focus. Your sole focus is bonding, community, of course, having some fun while you're doing it, but especially because so many of our students, especially on campus, are younger, maybe in their first or second year. Maybe some of those leadership skills are what they really need to take that next step as a student here, and that's what this does. And I'm also so happy that this is back on, because I know that this is something that you're always unbelievably passionate about. So,
and one thing that is super cool, I have to bring it up, this year's theme is going to be resilience, because it's something certainly our gals have had to embrace these past couple of years. And we are going to have someone come in, Heather Wiest, and she's going to do a boxing demo, which I think is going to be so fun.
And speaking of which, for those of you who need to get caught up on the Pirate Life podcast, you are now involved with boxing. You get up at 4:30 every morning, drive down to Mechanicsburg, take a 5:30 class, and then go back home and get ready for work.
It's one time of the day where it's easy for me not to get, like any other time of the day, it's easy to get hijacked, And that's fine. Like, I always want to be available for our students, but it makes it really hard to make it to a fitness class. 5:30 a.m., no students are stopping in, so it makes it easy.
When do you go to bed?
Depends on how much homework I have to do, but
4:30 in the morning.
Yeah,
that's not me.
It's so worth it, though. I love it.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that. So, just a quick recap of all the things that we have going on. Of course, the Back to Class Blast is going to take place on the Quad on April 14th from 11 to 1 p.m., weather permitting, of course. That's going to be followed by the Race Against Racism. That's going to take place on April 21st at 3 o'clock, followed by the Highway Cleanup on April 23rd. And a couple of baseball dates in there. I just want to point out that's April 15th and April 22nd. April 15th at In the Net, April 22nd at FNB Field. Or if you can't make it to either, please check us out at twitch.tv/Central Penn. The Women's Leadership Retreat will take place start on April 29th and end on May 1st. And the CPC Film Series will take place on Friday, May 13th at the Capitol Blue Cross Theater. Of course, any of these events, you can always reach out to Adrienne at Adrienne Thoman at centralpenn.edu for more information. How's that sound?
That sounds perfect.
Well, before we get out of here, I just want to thank you. So I had the opportunity to be on a recent edition of the Pirate Life podcast, and I must say that was a wonderful experience. I hope that I lived up to all of the wonderful things that you've said about me over the years. But the next episode will feature 20 questions with producer Paul. So I'm looking forward to hearing that.
Oh my gosh, it was so much fun. He did a great job. He definitely had a few moments where he caught us off guard with his answers. So I'll just leave that at there, but definitely listen.
And you can find the Pirate Life podcast anywhere you find your podcast. So be sure to check that out as well. Well, Adrienne, it sounds like you have been extremely diligent in setting us up with some wonderful events for the spring term. So keep doing what you're doing, because you do an amazing job. And frankly, I don't know where we would be without you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate all the students that helped me to do it, too.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Nightly News Podcast. For the Dean of Student Engagement, Adrienne Thoman, this is Professor Paul Miller, and I'll see you again next time on the Nightly News Podcast.
Hi, this is Brian Christiana. Thank you for listening to the Nightly News Podcast, a part of the Nightly News Media Club here at Central Penn College.
Welcome, everybody, to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and I am looking forward here to being back for the spring term as we have our first Nightly News Podcast of the spring 2022 term. Of course, earlier in the program, you got to hear from Adrienne Thoman, the Dean of Student Engagement, but now we are here with the Assistant Professor of Communication, Michael Lear-Olimpi. Michael, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Paul. It's good to be here.
I would also point out that this is your second occasion of being on the Nightly News Podcast, and we absolutely appreciate your experience and your efforts to help foster learning here in our corporate communication department.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it, and I'm always happy to do it. Second appearance, I don't want to make myself stale to the audience, but thanks for having me.
Well, what brings you here today is we had a conversation over break, and over break, the SPJ Ethics Week occurred from April 4th to April 8th, and you'd reached out to me, and of course I said that our first podcast would air during week 2, so we didn't want to let this Ethics Week go. Of course, by the time you're listening to this, Ethics Week has come and gone, but SPJ Ethics Week is really going to be the subject of our discussion today. So SPJ stands for the Society of Professional Journalists. Michael holds holds a couple of different positions through the Society of Professional Journalists, including being a member of the National Ethics Committee and the president of the Keystone Pro Chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists. So let's start there. First of all, talk a little bit about what SPJ is and how you got involved with the organization.
Well, okay, so SPJ, as you said, stands for the Society of Professional Journalists. It is the largest and oldest organization for professional journalists in the free world. And let me say that. I don't know of any others that come near it, but hey, I could say that and be wrong, and I don't want to be wrong. SPJ fosters professionalism, training, ethics, anything that journalists need to do their job. We're there to help. The society is there to help with. It also plays a very big role in protecting journalists and journalists' rights and fostering and supporting the First Amendment and providing information to not only members but the public through their website, spj.org, and through professional development activities and community consortiums and that sort of thing, to matters of access and privileged information such as how to get a hold of a court record, what information is open to the public, and that sort of thing.
So how did you get involved? I mean, obviously, and again, I don't want to go into a long discussion of your CV, but I mean, you've been a journalist and editor for over 30 years, including working at places like the Philadelphia Inquirer, and of course, being here at Central Penn for nearly a decade. So I really want to talk to you about how did this opportunity present itself, not only just to be a member, but you're the president of the Keystone Pro Chapter. I mean, that's a pretty incredible accolade to receive.
It is, and I wish we were doing more, but let me not dampen the efforts. How I got involved with the Society of Professional Journalists was while I was working in the 1980s in Lancaster at the Lancaster Intelligencer Journal and later at the Lancaster New Era. I was part of, I believe, of course, this is going back a long time now, almost 40 years. I think that I was part of an organizational membership to SPJ. And through that, I had access to some workshops and, believe it or not, actually some teleconferencing and calls, but it was a little bit different back in the 80s. So I saw what SPJ had to offer, and they offered more, of course, than my organization, LPN, Lancaster Newspapers, could at the time. And I joined. I was very enthusiastic about it. I'd always been interested in ethics, in the morality of ethics, and especially of communication and journalism, because at that time there's been discussion of ethics and journalism, transparency, responsibility, accountability, how are stories done, all that sort of thing. But, you know, when you're in a daily newsroom, there's not a lot of time for that. So I was happy to make myself part of those activities. And then I went to graduate school at Temple University in 1989 to earn my master's degree in journalism. And someone there, I don't even remember who it was, but someone on the journalism faculty, I suppose, asked if I would help revive the Temple University SPJ chapter. SPJ has student chapters across the country. And I said, sure. So I did that. And then I had a student and then a professional membership. And I just made myself available. You know how it is with volunteer jobs. It's a little bit of an oxymoron, but you know what I mean? Volunteer efforts. If you're there and you volunteer, you can do it. But I loved it, so I got involved. My study of ethics, I don't have formal training in ethics. I don't know that there necessarily is for journalism ethics.
I was going to say, isn't on the job enough in some cases?
Yeah, a lot of it is on the job, but a lot of it also is making opportunities to develop ethics workshops, taking advantage of programs such as SPJ offers. There are other organizations, too, that offer that sort of thing, but not as much as SPJ does. So I did. I made that my priority. I studied ethics. I wanted to know how it was ethics was or were. I use ethics as a singular noun, so if I say that, that's what I mean, ethics in general. How ethics is applied, what's the system. Plus, SPJ has the oldest code of ethics. Stretches back a long time. I think to 1926 when the first code was set up, and it's been revised several times, most recently in 2014. And just steep myself in that. I think it may have had something to do with my upbringing. I had a Catholic school education, and particularly in high school, ethics was a big deal. I was allowed when I was in high school to take some extra special religion courses that dealt with ethics. The moderator, advisor of my media club in high school was a priest, and he introduced the idea of ethics, studying ethics. So a lot of it has gone into that. And I found that because I was active, I was given opportunities to take a role in leadership.
Now, when we're talking about SPJ, so it sounds like we've gotten an idea of how you became a member. How did you become the president of the pro chapter here?
We needed one. No. Well,
the Keystone Pro chapter.
Keystone Pro chapter of SPJ covers Pennsylvania from, I don't know, east of Pittsburgh someplace, let's say Johnstown, to the Delaware River. In other words, the Pennsylvania border with New Jersey and Delaware, of course, and Maryland and New York. I'd been on the board of directors of SPJ Keystone Pro for 3 or 4 years. I was invited to join the chapter as a board member. I was already a regular member, but as a board member by the then president, Pat Trotsky, who had been the longtime president when I was at the National SPJ Conference in Baltimore in 2018. And she knew about me from chapter activities, and just by being in touch with what's going on in journalism and journalism education. She taught for a long time at Bloomsburg and at Luzerne County Community College. And she said, hey, do you want to join our board? I said, sure. And just in the natural course of being on the board and being an officer, I was director of ethics as well for SPJ Keystone Pro. She wanted to know last year that I want to run for president because she was stepping down after a long time. And I was voted in, and here I am.
But still, I mean, you kind of downplay it, but just the fact that your colleagues and people who you've worked with for over 3 decades believe in you enough in your abilities to lead this particular chapter of this, again, very prestigious organization. I mean, that's one thing I can always say about you, and knowing you for, again, nearly a decade at this point, is you're an extremely modest person. I mean, obviously I see it in your email signature, but it's not something that you gloat about in any reason, and I understand that, but it's still a major opportunity for you, and it's I mean, career-wise, it's got to look wonderful on a CV, you know, that you're the president of this chapter.
Yeah, I don't know if I answer this at all. Is that being immodest? No, no, that's true. Thank you. Thank you for that recognition. Yeah, I don't really think about it in any kind of a gloating way. I'm just happy to make my expertise available to people. You know, am I any more of a media ethics expert than a working journalist? Maybe, maybe not. You know, ethics, again, is a guideline. It's a system of decisions that one makes to decide whether right action is being taken. But yeah, I don't know that I'm so much worried about my CV anymore. I'm in my early 60s, but still. Yeah, it does feel good to know that people have that confidence in me.
I would argue, though, that because of your commitment to not only being a part of, you know, imparting ethical considerations on our students, it also is through the framework that you pursue, and when you write and when you edit, you're always doing so with an ethical eye on everything, which I honestly can say not all journalists do, certainly in today's day and age.
That's true, and that brings up, of course, a myriad of questions, such as what is a journalist? What's journalism in these days? But, well, I thank you for that also, recognition. That feels nice to know that someone believes that about what I do, because that is what I do. I think that ethics in professional journalists, if anyone by chance hears this who knows me outside of the college community, hears me say professional journalist, they'll say, wait, what's he saying? Because I call it a professionalized trade. But I think that most responsible, let's say, journalists who work at a professional level always have ethics in the back of their mind. Yeah. Sometimes on deadline, those decisions are made unconsciously. The values have become implicit in these journalists. But then there are others of us who are, I don't know if the term is more interested, more
dedicated,
inclined, maybe more dedicated. Maybe we have the luxury to think about it because at that moment we're not on a deadline. We're looking at someone else's work. But again, I fold my interest in that, making sure, as sure as I can, that the public knows that this story that they're reading, something that they're looking at, a photograph that they're seeing perhaps, was done with every possible ethics consideration. Is there transparency? Are the sources identified? Are there more than one source? Is the location clear? Is there a dateline? Everything that we consider when we go down the checklist for ethics in journalism.
Now, let me ask you, this is a question that I get a lot. And, of course, my background isn't necessarily in journalism. Of course, it's more, on the PR marketing side of the house and broadcast as well. But one of the questions I get a lot is, how do companies like CNN and Fox News get away with their blatantly biased on one side or the other, the way that they frame their news stories? Do they just not consider ethical considerations at all in their reporting? Or, is there more to it than that?
I think there's more to it than that. It does seem that way to the public when they see particular brands, different outlets, stories. You also have to keep in mind that much of network news, cable network news, cable news these days, particularly video, is composed of columnists. There is opinion journalism going on. And a lot of what you see when you watch a cable system is that. You turn on CNN, you turn on Fox, you'll see a lot of that. There is political framing, of course. I don't want to get into communications terms, but sure, you can see that. Does a particular angle in a story that you might be able to notice, maybe some hues of politics in it or closeness to a source or something like that, necessarily make that piece unethical? Not always. If there's enough transparency and fairness that it's obvious to the reader that the information is unconnected to and not being controlled by a specific source, such as a political source, then that's probably an ethical piece of journalism.
However, you could certainly point to, frankly, any number of cable, and I don't mean to just pull CNN and Fox News. Those are just probably two of the most popular.
Well, sure, they're the two big ones.
I believe that when we watch this, I guess I'm surprised on how many people don't realize, to your point, that the vast majority of programming that we see on cable news is blatant opinion, which is fine. To your point, opinion is a very important part of news in a general sense.
Sure.
But not, to me, it seems like that most people treat that opinion as fact. And do you think that something needs to be done to label these particular shows opinion versus fact? Like, I don't know. Like, that's where I'm sort of at a crossroads. Like, I do believe that obviously these, in a free press, we shouldn't limit the ability of these organizations to disseminate their opinion in whatever way they do so. However, when it's played off as fact, maybe people who are not as media savvy or media literate may not understand that and think that what they're watching is fully fact and that this other organization is spreading fake news, for example.
Yeah, that's true. I don't want to put the responsibility off of journalists. Again, if journalists are practicing ethical journalism, they're balancing the information, they're reporting facts or checking to be sure the facts are facts. They're being fair. They're including the proper sources. They're not inserting their opinion directly into the piece. Okay, that's their responsibility. Sometimes some of that is done more or less than with the rest of it. There is a responsibility, of course, among news consumers to look at things critically and to listen to things critically, read news critically, and ask themselves some of those questions. Where is this coming from? Do I see a political bias here? Is this story reporting on what the Biden administration is doing or the Trump administration or whatever administration? Or is it commenting on it? Is any of this, who are they interviewing? For example, Mick Mulvaney, the former chief of staff for President Trump, is now going to a network. So you have to ask yourself, when I look at reporting that he's involved in or commentary, how do I look at that? What exactly is the angle there? So it's also partly the audience's responsibility.
Do you believe that the audience, by and large, does that?
No.
I agree, and that's kind of where I was going with that, but I wanted to see your thoughts first.
Yeah, I figured you were going there, but I wanted to split the responsibility. The audience doesn't. Yeah, sure, it is fair. It is fair. The audience doesn't necessarily do that, no, because look, we're looking for sound bites. We're looking for eye bites. We want to see things, find out things quickly. Of course, the internet and other types of information distribution technology has multiplied this problem. But again, we can't take the responsibility off of either side, journalists or the audience. And the audience needs to pick what it believes is truth and fact. many people are seeking to confirm their own opinions, and that's going to happen no matter what. I mean, that's been going on for centuries. But people, if they want to practice, let's say, ethical readership or decision making, they should use the same type of scrutiny that a journalist is using. It should be easier to apply it if the reporting is ethical. But again, people need to make up their own minds.
On a separate note, and I don't want to get bogged down with just specifically talking about the media here, because this is really about media ethics. Walk us through how you approach teaching communication media, not only in the class that we have that's specific to ethics, but also through the club. So what are some ways that you are able to impart knowledge to our student reporters or our communication students in these classes?
Okay, so in the class, Com 215, Communications Ethics, it is heavy on journalism ethics, but I stress to students in that course that they're using essentially, up to a certain point, the same ethics process and moral decision-making process that public relations practitioners are using. Information or facts that are offered are true. If we were doing public relations ethically and responsibly, sure, that it's true. You know, there's this tendency for a long, long time in journalism to call public relations the dark side. And right, flak, as though there's military, anti-aircraft flak coming up against you. It's really an unfair characteristic, especially these days when people, in target audiences, which is what we call the people that public relations messages are being sent out to directly or indirectly, are called, or a general audience. The ethics is really the same. You're purveying truth. Public relations practitioners who are ethical, such as for, let's say, a department or a division of an organization, they want to tell the truth. If lying is found out, of course, that's bad. That's bad will, and it's not good for the company. So although I do stress the journalism ethics part of it, because that's, as I tell our students, journalism serves the public. It's the public being served in general. Public relations is serving the public, but target publics. So I try to stress the just honesty, integrity, the morality. I do use the SPJ code. We look at a good many case studies. We take a look at resources on the Society of Professional Journalists webpage. I offer them my experience. I give them examples of moral reasoning models to use. The Potter box is one of the examples. It's a box with quadrants in it that was developed by a guy named Ralph Potter, who was a theologian on the staff of the Harvard Divinity School. He's a faculty member. So I offer them those resources. We also take a look at the Public Relations Society of America's code and look at those components too, so that they have an understanding of how it's done, how they can effectively reason out moral questions. With the club, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, to that point, I think it's easier to impart that knowledge in a class setting where you've got, I don't want to say ample time, because we always run out of time, right?
If it's a 3-hour class on a Thursday night, we have time.
Right. But my point is, okay, so many of those students you do have come through that communication ethics class. However, the Nightly News is open to all students. And in fact, even as recently as 2020, one of our president of the club was an accounting major. So how do you impart wisdom to the club members who most of which are communication students, but not always, maybe people who are never going to take that class?
I impart those values, those ethics of journalism values to them by working with them. If I know they're a communications major, I work with them in editing the story. I give them notes, prime them up for when they're approaching the story. Who will your sources be? Be sure that they're not pushing a point of view. Get facts, attribute, make it apparent and transparent to whom you're speaking and why you chose that person. Quotes, check quotes. Be sure that what you're putting in quotation marks is accurate and include attribution. Have more than one source, what I was talking about before, and find authoritative, transparent, and reliable sources to use. Of course, now I point them in that direction often. They add to it. Now, people who are not communications majors, I give the same guidance, but I work in the editing process a little more closely with those students so that they can learn what it is they need to look at and be sure of. There are many checked boxes to hit when you're editing a story or writing a story that I think the general public isn't aware of. I think it's, when you buy a carton of ice cream, you think, gee, here's this ice cream. It went through a factory. It was made with milk. It's frozen. It's boxed. It came to the supermarket. And that's it. You go home, you eat it, then you worry about the ramifications of that later. But you're not necessarily thinking that the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the FDA, the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, quality inspectors, and the all of these factors have been involved. And that's what I try to get across to the students. You want to produce a story that is so obviously true, so factual, so helpful, not biased. They do write opinion pieces. I'm talking about a general story that the reader doesn't have to say, wait a minute, and scratch your head and say, well, what am I reading here?
One of the things that has this year really, I think, brought some additional attention, positive attention to the club is the announcement that the Nightly News Media Club at Central Penn College has been awarded 3 different Pennsylvania News Media Association student awards. For astute listeners of the podcast, you will know that earlier in the show, we talked a bit about how Leslie Heimbaugh and I won for Best Podcast, an honorable mention. But frankly, these awards directly speak to you and your influence. Of course, the students are of utmost importance in this process.
Sure.
However, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but to me, frankly, this award should be shared by you with the students, because if it wasn't for your guidance, and for example, one of the things we won was for Best Diversity Series in our Layers of Community series. This was your idea, and not only was it your idea, you worked specifically with the individual students to not only develop the stories, but edit them, of course, and distribute them. And so, you know, I'd love to learn a little bit more about what your initial feelings were when I unfortunately interrupted your class that day for a moment to let you know the good news. But
breaking news, so it was fine.
What seriously, what were your feelings when you first found out that we'd won 3 additional awards?
I was very proud of them. That was my first thought. I was like, wow, they did it. I mean, look, we got 2. We've won an award. You've referred to it in previous podcasts. We won an award in the 2019 competition. Yep. Leslie, also for a piece of criticism review. But my first thought, really, when you said that was, I'm so proud of these students. I'm so proud of the work that they've done. Yeah, they get guidance from me, sure, but we have raw talent there. I mean, they 2 of them were not communications majors, but they also had an interest in writing and in reporting, and there's some talent there. I like to think I help shape the talent. I help guide it. In my career as a reporter and editor, I have been known as a wordsmith. I take pride in well-crafted prose, but I help imbue that in them, I hope, and I help grow that in them. But really, I thought, wow, you know, they did it. It was fantastic. We've done it again. And we don't even have a journalism program.
I think, and it's interesting because I tried to explain, of course, now I will continue to say that I am now an award-winning podcaster, so all of the time that I've spent in the studio has now been validated somewhat. But no, in all honesty, it was my honor to do it with Leslie. But what fascinates me, and I'm going to be totally honest with you, and I don't know if I've even told you this before, to me, it is the online newspaper that we have that drives everything else. It drives the podcast in that I will, you know, when I'm making the schedule for the podcast, I'm looking at what stories we're doing, right? In terms of the sports broadcasting wouldn't have a platform to distribute if it wasn't for the things that we've already been doing for years. It's not like we're just going to pop up and say, oh, well, we've created this YouTube channel and this is where it's all going to go. Because then after the fact, I'll write up a story or a student will write up a story about the game, and then we have a multimedia package. So all of the things that we do in this club come directly from the written pieces. And so I'm not sure if you've ever looked at it that way, but frankly, we wouldn't be what we are without you and your guidance to students. And I know I give it here when I can, and I try to help you out where I can, but you're the one that oversees the entire publication, our quarterly publication, our entire online newspaper. It's frankly unbelievable how what you do with not only, I mean, we're competing against schools with nearly 10,000 students.
Right.
You know, 8, 9 times as many students as we have, and we are competing with those schools. And to your point, we don't even have a journalism program. Our program is specifically focused more on corporate communication, public relations. So, like, I just give you so much credit for the way that you work with our students and push them gently, into becoming better writers. And it's frankly, it's really amazing the transformation that I've seen so many of our students have because of your working with them.
Well, thank you. I'm glad someone's noticing. It wouldn't be necessary.
Well, the
but I'm
Pennsylvania News Media Association has noticed as well.
Well, I'm not teaching them how to do podcasts either, so you also play a big role there.
And I appreciate that too. And it is a wonderful. Honestly, the Nights of the Movies podcast was just a passion project,
It was
something
terrific,
that we
yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to do, and we love it. And honestly, what's very interesting is I do believe my dissertation topic is going to come out of our very last episode that we did, ironically enough. So,
Well, not so ironic. I just want to add a note.
Of course.
By the way, that's an opinion piece, so podcasts mostly are. But I just want to add that the layers of, well, at first it was called the Layers of Diversity series, and the intention was to show layers of diversity among faculty and staff at Central Penn. The idea to package a series of stories focusing on that was my idea. In fact, you and I had discussed, even before that was talked about anywhere else in the college, doing something along those lines. But the series, which was later named Layers of Community, which we thought better reflected what we were doing, also, I have to share credit for that with Janet Bixler, our director of first-year experience. And I'm sorry, but whoever it was on the Institutional Diversity and Inclusion Committee, if that's what we call it, we changed its name, the Diversity Committee, which I serve on. Someone there also suggested something. So it was a group effort. But surely, I handled the editorial part. Yeah.
Honestly, when I saw that one, that was the one to me that I was so proud of, because we put so much work into that. You especially, we put a lot of work into that,
Yeah.
And it was just, it's wonderful. So just a final piece, I just want to give a shout out. We are going to be sponsoring the CPC film series. It's going to take place on Friday, May 13th. At that event, we are going to present the awards to the winning student journalists. So please, those supporters of the Nightly News, please come out. We'll be presenting those awards first. That'll be right around 6:30. So please just come out. And then our president and award winner, Janelle Dulac, will be presenting Hairspray again on May 13th at 6 o'clock. The doors open in the Capitol Blue Cross Theater. So, Mike, it's always a pleasure. Of course, we could probably be here for another couple of hours talking about this. But it was important to me. Like, you'd reached out about doing a podcast for the SPJ Ethics Week. And frankly, it's been a subject we've never really touched on. And I really wanted to have you in to talk more about not only your role with them, but what role you being a media ethicist has on our students. And I think you did a wonderful job covering that.
Well, thank you. And about the Ethics Week coverage, we were on break. I mean, there wasn't time to do it and make it timely enough while it was going on. But hey, benefit anyway. I thank you for doing this.
Media ethics is something we should be concerned about 365 days a year.
We should be.
So, well, Professor Olimpi, thank you so much for your time here today. It's always my pleasure to have you on the show.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Nightly News Podcast for Assistant Professor and Media Ethicist Michael Lear-Olimpi. This is Professor Paul Miller, and I'll see you again next time on the Nightly News Podcast.